Hi guys! First thing you might notice about me is I've got a new look. Got new glasses today. I decided it was time for something different. Anyway, I am really glad to see you guys here at another one of my live streams. I'm so happy that you decided to come. We last left Destiny at Maple Ridge Hospital under the care of Dr. Amaro, who insisted to Destiny's parents that she was on unsafe dosages and too many different types of medications for a 68-pound child, even if she was 17. It's a crime to overmedicate, she kept insisting. In the end, Dr. Amaro took Destiny off her 3 times a day megadoses of Haldol that she got through her J-tube with Dr. Amaro and took away 3/4 of her Abilify. Hey, Rachel. What Dr. Amaro was not realizing was the fact that Destiny had severe gastroparesis and couldn't possibly absorb all the medicine that they were giving her, even though it was going through a feeding tube that bypassed her stomach and went straight into the middle of her small intestine. They had to give her huge doses of medication in hopes that a little of it would get absorbed. Destiny went downhill rapidly, even after the first missed dose. We'll start reading here at David vs. Goliath, Chapter 22 of Saving Destiny. We are reading from Bonnie, Destiny's mom's perspective. Mom. After we finished visiting with Destiny, we followed one of the nurses into a small meeting room with a thriving spider plant. Sorry, guys. Gotta fix my sweater. Wardrobe adjustments are very important. With thriving spiders in the corner, the doctor was sitting there waiting for us. Hi, she stood up and held out her hand. I introduced ourselves and the 2 hardback chairs. Very concerned about the state Destiny is in right now. Alan began. Ever since she's been off her medications, she's been worse than we've seen her in years, if not ever. Well, as I've explained to your wife, I am not comfortable with the amount of medication that Destiny was on. I understand that. But if the medication was preventing her from decompensating like this, then why would we want to take her off of it? Alan asked. I wasn't planning on taking her off of it, just reducing it, the doctor explained. Well, since you've reduced it, she's lost complete contact with reality, I tried explaining to Dr. Amaro. Basically, the deal is this, Alan told her. Either you put her back on the Haldol and the higher dosage of Abilify, or we sue you for malpractice. Anyone can see the state she's in right now is not normal. We have recent videos Destiny and Bonnie made. They clearly show her at her baseline. Any judge seeing the difference in the videos and how she is now will see it in our favor as an open and shut case. Alan held up his phone, showing a video of Destiny. Dr. Amaro shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I'll do it. Just know that I don't feel that this is the medically appropriate choice. But when she becomes comatose from all that medication, I put no part in it. Alan just nodded, but I could tell from his expression that he was holding back an avalanche of angry and frustrated comments. I reached over, my hand on top of his. He took my hand and squeezed it. We walked out of the small conference room, hand in hand. "You're Destiny's hero today," I told him. "No, just her dad," he told me. "That I think that both of those." I smiled at him. I called Destiny every day to check on how she was doing. Her sentences began to make sense again, and she sounded less monotone now that she was back on her usual medications. "It's weird, but I almost missed the Jackson Center," she told me. "I actually want to go back there." "Hi, Ellen." "Did you call staff there?" I asked her. "Yeah, I call them usually at night. They're not mad at me," she said. "They're not mad at you. They help you," I explained to her. "Hey, Laura." It sounded like she believed this. "Up to visit again. As soon as possible. Tomorrow or the next day," I promised her. "I'm just so glad you're feeling more like yourself." Yeah, when my medications were all lower, there was noise coming in from everywhere. It was the mosh pit at a Hard Rock concert. It was impossible to hold focus on anything or hold my own thoughts for longer than like 2 minutes. Destiny tried to explain to me. "That sounds like a living nightmare," I told Destiny. I sympathized, trying to hold in my surprise. Destiny had never told me so much about what went on in her inner world when her mental health symptoms were so bad. "You can't hear me, Elaine? Is anyone else having trouble hearing me?" Is anyone else having trouble hearing me? Hang on a second. Oh, it's your phone? Okay. As long as it's just your phone. I felt honored that she was now trusting me enough to share things like this with me. That's kind of what it was like. A really bad nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The worst part was some of the stuff that was happening in reality, and between what was real and what wasn't. Oh, it's choppy for you too, Laura? I can't even begin to imagine how horrible that must be. But what I do know is that you are the strongest girl I have ever met. And you always seem to figure out how to make positives out of any situation. You just keep being you, and things will work out. I'm so glad you got to put me back on the medicines, she told me. I knew you needed them, and without them, I felt like I was losing real you. I explained, figuring I should also let Destiny know what went on for me while she was in the midst of a psychotic episode. We were opening up the lines of communication in a way we never had before. Even though I hate getting all those crushed up pills and liquids put through my J-tube because of how nauseous they make me, they do help a lot. Destiny agreed. You've got to thank Dad for that, I told her. You know how he gets. He wouldn't back down or give up until he got the doctor to put your medicine. Is that right now? She asked me. Yeah. You want to say hi? I gave the phone to Alan, who spoke with her for a few minutes and promised to visit her soon before returning the phone to me. I'll come to see you soon, too, I promised her. Once the phone was disconnected, I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, frozen for a moment. The conversation with Destiny had felt so special that I had wished it would never end. I felt Alan place a hand on my shoulder. I turned around and gave him a kiss. He held me gently, the way you'd hold a baby bird that you rescued after it fell out of a tree because it got neglected by its mother. This is Destiny's perspective now. Oh, Lord, my bear. This is Avery. One of my nurses gave her to me. My nurse Carly gave her to me as a birthday present. Destiny. When the onslaught of hallucinations and clouds of confusion faded away, I was left with myself, Blinkie, and a small room on a psychiatric unit for teenagers. After a few days back on my meds, I got used to the hospital routine. There were therapy groups, school, quiet time, and free time. I talked to my mom at least once a day, every day, and I talked to Eliza fairly often over the phone. The Jackson Center staff talked to me on the phone frequently too. That was starting to make me nervous. I didn't know what they would be like when I went back. The whole time, clenching and unclenching my fists with nerves. I didn't trust the staff at the hospital at all either. First of all, like the paramedics that had brought me there, they swore all the time. They also joked about sex and drug use with the kids. Staff at the Jackson Center would never behave like that. Then they accused me of taking drugs, even when I swore to them that I hadn't. After that, they screwed up all my medications. On top of everything else, on my 5th day, a major incident occurred with this girl named Sasha. Most of us were in the day room, and Sasha lightly swung at one of the staff named Darren, playfully, because she was all hyped up in a manic state. Darren was this tall guy that was built like a sumo wrestler. Sasha wasn't much bigger than me. She was no threat to Darren whatsoever. But Darren grabbed her arm and violently tackled her to the floor. We could all hear Sasha crying loudly in pain. Darren clenched her arms behind her back and pulled at them harder than necessary. Sasha pulled her head up for a moment and glared right at Darren. He put his hand, which was bigger than her entire face, on the back of her head and jammed it into the ground. Sasha kicked and screamed and fought against Darren. We could hear the agony in her voice. By then, other staff filtered in and tried to get all of us kids out of the day room. You were all deathly silent as we walked out as slowly as possible. At our last glimpse of Sasha and Darren, Sasha had blood all over her face, and Darren's white t-shirt covered in her blood as well. A sick and scared feeling washed over me. I knew that the staff would twist the story to make sure that all the blame would be put on Sasha and that Darren would come out looking innocent, maybe even skilled or brave. Staff put the whole unit on lockdown for the next hour. I desperately felt like I needed to process the recent assault with someone, but I was forbidden to leave my room, along with the other kids on the unit. When they finally let us out of our rooms for dinner, Sasha was noticeably absent, and Darren had changed out of the bloody white t-shirt he had been wearing earlier. That was awful earlier, I commented to Amber, one of the other patients at dinner, where I was sitting in a chair next to the IV pole holding my tube, my water flush bag, and my pump. They had taken my backpack away, as they were calling it a safety risk due to the straps on it. All the kids stared at me and the way I never ate any food, but almost no one asked me questions to my face. I think they thought I was dying or something because of all my equipment. They could see the tubing coming out from under my t-shirt from my J-tube, the tubing coming out of the B-tube drainage bag that was from my waist by a clip, the IV pole I had to lug around with me, and how severely underweight I was. They were afraid to ask questions because they didn't want to rub in my face that I was dying. Yeah, I feel really bad for Sasha. She had no chance. Have you seen Sasha? Is she in big trouble now? Well, Darren is getting away looking like a hero to all the adults, another girl at the table said bitterly. Yeah, it sucks. He's like 3 times her size, and he used 3 times more force than necessary. She's barely bigger than you. He could have dodged the blow or gently held her arms down. He didn't need to tackle her or almost break her nose. Amber's tone was angry. Yeah, but we're mental patients and teenagers, so no one cares about our opinions. They'll find a way of phrasing things just so, and it will be all our fault, I explained, sadly. The next day, Sasha's nose was still swollen, but in our books, Sasha was a hero, a David that had been matched up against Goliath. Sure, she hadn't won, but she had been valiant and courageous, and that's what mattered. While I was in the hospital, I met up with the social worker and the psychiatrist every day. 2 days after the incident with Sasha had gone down, the social worker, Leslie, explained to me that she had spoken with Eliza. Eliza wants you to do a behavioral chain analysis about what happened that got you sent to the hospital, Leslie explained to me. It's all kind of messed up in my head, I tried to explain to Leslie. I hated behavioral chain analyses because they were part of DBT, and DBT was intended for patients with borderline personality disorder. I knew I didn't have borderline personality disorder because I'd looked it up, and the symptoms didn't match. Not to me. But people loved to ignore the fact that I heard voices and saw things that other people couldn't see, and that the only time I ever hurt myself was when the hallucinations got too intense and loud. She says that you can't come back until you do that, Leslie told me. My nails bit into my palms. so deeply, leaving marks like my hands had been attacked by an angry cat. I nodded. Later that day, I sat on my hospital bed with a pen and a bunch of papers and tried to figure out how to write a chain analysis based on the chaotic mess that had gone on for me before being sent to the hospital. It took me a couple of days, but I finally managed to create my own rendition of a chain analysis. There were a lot of areas where I had to write, things got blurry and confusing here, or there was too much happening at once and I don't know what was real or what wasn't. After I finished, I handed it to Leslie to look it over. She approved it, and I sighed with relief. We're going to be having a meeting with everyone, even Eliza, in a couple of days, Leslie informed me. You can give the analysis to her then. Getting through the next 2 days was difficult. There were so many kids with so many problems, all locked together in the same few halls and rooms of the psychiatric unit. Our misery permeated the air. I tried to talk to a few of the other kids, but sometimes it got overwhelming. Time dragged on so slowly, especially during quiet time, which occurred twice a day. During quiet time, we had to stay in our room and do quiet activities. It's all I did normally, but when it was forced on me, it made me feel trapped and suffocated. I pinned all my hopes on the meeting with Eliza. When Eliza arrived on Thursday morning, I had never been so happy to see her. I threw myself at her and gave her a huge hug. Immense relief flooded through me when she hugged me back and smiled warmly at me. I loved Eliza's smile with the slight gap between her two front teeth and all the kindness shining through it, even when she didn't understand me. How are you doing? She asked me. I kind of just shrugged, not wanting to lie about anything. The meeting went well. Dr. Amaro explained that she had started me on trilactol for my mood swings and agitation, and that I was calmer now and doing much better. If we discharge Destiny in a couple of days, will you be okay with that? Dr. Amaro asked Eliza. Well, that depends on Destiny, Eliza answered. Destiny, do you feel like you can be safe and in control if you're discharged in a couple of days? I nodded immediately. How will things be different when you go back? Leslie asked me. I was silent for a few minutes. Honestly, I didn't know how things would be different. I had been trying my hardest to stay in control before, and it hadn't worked at all. Still, I didn't know what else I could do. I knew I couldn't tell them that. I would never get out of the hospital if I said something like that. Well, I hesitated as I racked my brain for the right words. I'll try to wrap up in the weighted blanket to ground myself when I first start feeling like I might lose control. I stammered, trying to come up with something else to say after that. Finally, I just used the magic words that seemed to work almost all the time. And I will use my coping skills more, I finally told them. Everyone nodded. Leslie handed Eliza my chain analysis. It was 3 pages long and detailed my memories of what had happened, as well as ideas of what I could do to prevent myself from getting as bad in the future. It was full of all the magic words that I knew wouldn't actually help me, because I always tried everything because I had already tried everything I had listed, and it hadn't been enough. I will talk to staff sooner when the voices get loud, I'd written. I will ask for my Haldol instead of waiting till I completely fall apart. I will use the sensory room more. Eliza studied the analysis for a while. We'll be seeing you back at the Jackson Center in 2 days, Eliza smiled and told me. One of the staff will drive up here and pick you up around 10:30 a.m. or 11 a.m. I clapped my hands together in happy excitement. The next 2 days seemed to take 2 weeks. When Tara arrived to take me back to the Jackson Center, I gave her a giant hug and was filled with relief. When she gave me a big hug back, "You ready, kiddo?" she asked me. I nodded and grinned. I'd had all my stuff packed back together since around 6 a.m. When I stepped through the locked doors of the unit, suddenly the air got lighter, and I felt like I could breathe better. The fresh air washed away some of the pain that had permeated the adolescent psych unit of Maple Ridge Hospital. Tara had brought me my pink slippers to wear on my feet because I was considered a suicide risk. I would not be allowed to wear real shoes until Eliza and the house staff felt I was safe enough. My pink slippers made funny scuffling sounds along the pavement in the parking lot as I followed Tara out to the car. "So you're going to be on special status when you get back to the program," Tara explained to me. "And just so you know, you're maxed out with 24 hours of consequence time." Okay, I nodded. Some of the novelty of being out of the hospital was already fading into fear and anxiety. How was I going to work off 24 hours of room time? Sam C. was there to greet me when we got back. More fear and anxiety came trickling back. "Welcome back," Sam C. smiled at me, but I swore there was something malicious in that grin. I knew then that things weren't going to be that easy. That is the end of chapter 22. So, just out of curiosity, what do you guys think of it? Any comments? Questions? You liked it, Elaine? The next chapter will be coming up soon. I think I'm going to do one from Was I Ever Normal next, and then I'm going to do the next chapter from this one. I'm so glad you liked it, Elaine. Do you guys have any questions for me? I did put at the top of the notes, I don't know if any of you want to scroll up, the phone number and the website where you can order my book, Was I Ever Normal, early. I can put it in again right here. Hang on a second. I'm going to put it in again right here. Oh, I'm sorry you missed some, Elaine. Right here, I'm going to put in again. This is the first thing I'm putting in is the number that you can call to order my book, Was I Ever Normal, as an early release. It's the same price as it'll cost coming out in stores. But if you call that number, you can order a copy of my book. It's $32. It's paperback, but it's really thick. It looks like this is what it looks like. What's your question, Elaine? Have I already written what? I'm confused what you're asking, Elaine. This is the book, Was I Ever Normal? The other one that I've been reading aloud. I'm going to keep reading it aloud. But for people that can't read for whatever reason, if they have eye problems, if they have focus problems, I'll keep reading it aloud. But this is the book that I just published. And the number that I just posted is the number you can call to order this book. And then there's also a website. Hang on, I put it right at the top of the chat. The website's right at the top of the chat. Try and put it right here. Now let me scroll down. And that's the website. If you go to my website here, if you message me, I'll send you the number. It's not one chapter. The book isn't one chapter. It's not on Audible. See, this is Was I Ever Normal? This is the book, Was I Ever Normal? It's not on Audible, but I'm going to keep reading it aloud so people who can't read straight by looking at words and reading them, I'm going to keep reading this book aloud. But what I gave was the number and the website so that people can order the book. Yeah, the book is already in print. This is the book. This is the book that I wrote. This is the one I wrote. See, it says Becca Pava right here. Was I Ever Normal? This is the cover. There's a picture of me on the back. It's already in print and for sale. I already sold over 20 copies. But they're only early copies. It's not in Barnes & Nobles yet. It's only for sale at the website I gave you and the phone number I gave you. Within the next 6 weeks, it'll be in Barnes & Nobles, Books A Million, Kindle. Alright, I think I'm going to end my stream here, guys. Love y'all. Till next time.